Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard. I went from being a lawyer and partner at one of the largest firms in America to becoming an online personality and successful entrepreneur. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your health and personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you chase joy while achieving success? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast.
Guess who's back? Back again. Guess who's back? Tell a friend. I'm back, bitches. Hustle and Flow is back after a 3.5-year hiatus. It feels so good. So good to be back together again. So much has happened over 3.5 years. Can you believe it was June of 2020 when I recorded the final episode for Hustle and Flow? I personally cannot believe it has been that long because I know it all transpired and I'm just like 3.5 years, really 3.5 years. So Hustle and Flow is officially back. I've got a new cat. I've got an old cat. You're going to learn all the things. We have so much time to catch up. But today, I just want to say I'm back. Hustle and Flow is back. And I want to give you just a little bit of an update on what happened, what transpired over the last 3.5 years, as well as give you a heads up as to what's going to be the same as the old Hustle and Flow and what will be new and updated with this reboot. I was joking on Instagram that all of the boy bands are doing it. So why shouldn't we? Let's get together again and have fun. And at the end, I've got a fun little challenge for you so that we can do this together. Because I'm competitive, but for all of us, like I'm here for all of us. Okay, so I guess the question is, where have I been and why am I back? First, I want to share what's in the background. I decided to record today in my new home in what I call the library, which is an inside joke. There really aren't even that many books, but this is my gorgeous Whitney Stoddard painting. It's called Gangs All Here. And those women really got me through so much. I sit and stare at them all the time. I think they're just the most beautiful little ladies. And I actually my friend Rachel D'Alto, she was visiting Nashville and she was like, can we do brunch? And I said, yes, but I have to buy something that's going to go for sale at a very certain time. And I'm going to be unavailable for conversation at that point. And we were laughing about me trying to buy this piece. The moment I saw it, I knew it was mine. You also probably recognize the Bob McGill piece in the corner. And if you're listening and you're like, Heather, I don't know where you've been the last 3.5 years, but podcasts don't show anything. Like that's just audio. It's just audio, honey. Okay, well, I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I don't want to confuse you if you are listening. And that is one of the updates is this podcast is videotaped. Yes. So if you're watching on YouTube, you 100% can see the Whitney Stoddard painting behind me and the Bob McGill folk art piece, the old piano that you used to see probably in my Facebook lives or things like that. So if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, wherever else you like to get your podcasts, you can pause and head on over to YouTube if you would like. And if you're like, Heather, I don't want to do that. I just want to listen. Well, keep listening. But I am going to refer sometimes to what's going on in the background, including my cats, who, by the way, have been asleep for hours. And I hit record, and they're now like in full on just jungle gym mode. So that's part of the new hustle and flow as well. I'm in a lot more flow in my life. I have let go of a lot of perfectionism. There's been a lot of surrendering that has gone on. So this is a more casual version of hustle and flow, although many of you always could hear my dogs in the background, especially their like little feet hitting the tiles. Both of them have passed away in the past 3.5 years, which is so sad because it was not their time to go. They were not of age really to be dying, but they both kind of had random illnesses that took them out all of a sudden. So that's kind of the Debbie Downer news for the beginning of this. But I know if I was in conversation with you right now, you would have a lot of shitty stuff to report to that's happened in the last 3.5 years. Like, I don't really know anyone who's like been just amazing, knocking it out of the park, loving it, had no issues. Actually, I do know one person. And if you have, like, no need to feel guilty, enjoy it. But most of us we've gone through a few things, right? So we're going to be a little bit more casual. Quick update on what has transpired, which is going to be hard because how do you give a quick update on 3.5 years? And some of you may know some of this. Some of you may be like, I had no clue whatsoever. All right. So in June of 2020, we were prepping for summer camp, which was, we recorded it live from Mirabal, Austin. It was virtual. Those of you who showed up, my goodness, you played out. We had so much fun. It was fabulous. I feel like we were one of like the first to actually do the virtual events in a really cool way. The technology hadn't quite caught up yet, but we really made it a journey and people got to connect. It was not the same as in person, which we knew going into it, but we were trying to make the best of it. But it was around that time, as I was prepping for all of that, that I was really wanting to move into a brand that was always on my heart and my mind. And I had written a keynote around it called Simple Courage. And I just really wanted to go all in. And so in order to do that, I shut the podcast down. And yet it took, I swear, almost a year for that to come out. And it's really interesting because I don't fully know if it was just my desire for simple courage or if it was because of the health problems that I was having. So absolutely, I had symptoms and knew there was something wrong with me in August, September of 2020. But when you look back, right, like once you know what was going on and you look back, there were signs, there were symptoms, and it very well could have been in June of 2020. I had an adrenal tumor that it was really starting to show those like first signs and symptoms. And so it's hard to know whether those things are connected or different, or if I would have made different decisions or acted differently had I not had the tumor. And that's just one thing we will never know. But I did my best to bring Simple Courage to life. I hired a huge team around it. I am so proud of the work that we did. We put forth, I really thought great content in circles and in a membership, and I wanted it to be more affordable and at a better price point than like the really high-end stuff that I used to do. And we just could not get it off the ground. Again, was it something that just didn't work, or was part of it because of the tumor that I was dealing with and I could not show up the way I was used to showing up? So it was like, I'm pushing this boulder uphill and it just wasn't going, it wasn't budging. And my health was getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, I actually had a doctor who was like, can you take a sabbatical? Can you just stop? Can you shut down the business for a while? And I was like, no, absolutely not. Right? Like I took something, and my business was already hit by COVID because we had live events and all of these things planned that then had to be backtracked. And then I put a new offering out and it was not financially successful. And I had put investments for it. And I was like, no, this is the time when I have to like double down. And luckily there was this small, quiet voice within that it told me, you you need to rest. You need to stop. Because we all know the concept of throwing, good money after bad money, or like you just keep doubling down on something that's losing because you're like, well, I'm this far in, right? Like I can't quit now. When sometimes it just makes you feel even more defeated and depleted. And so I took a year sabbatical, which was not any fun. I think a lot of people are like, a sabbatical would be amazing. And it probably would under the right circumstances. This one felt like I didn't have a lot of choice around it. Of course, I made the choice to take it, but I did not enjoy my time. I was not doing things that I loved. In fact, it was after the year sabbatical was up that I really was like, I've got to find my mojo again. I've got to find my spirit again. I've got to reclaim who I am because this is not it. I was in a very depressed place and was just like, this, if this is the rest of my life, like this ain't working. Something has to shift. Something has to change. And it was in that exploration, which has really happened over the last 6 months, that I came back to the place of, I really want to bring hustle and flow back. It brought me so much joy. And I know it helped so many of you. I think it is one of the things that I'm proudest of in my life. We had, let's see, 168 episodes over several years. And, I just abruptly announced we were ending it. And I just feel like there was so much unfinished business there. And I do know from the adrenal tumor for sure, some of the decisions that I was making was because of that. And I feel like in many ways, I just left behind everything I had built. In many ways, I kind of like turned my back on you all. And I think a lot of that, ironically, was out of fear. But I was like, that story's not over. That chapter hasn't finished. And I think you guys know me well enough to know that I try to walk my talk. And I don't think that decisions have to be permanent. I think you can always come back. And this is me trying that. This is me doing that. Not just trying, I'm doing it. So the adrenal tumor that I had, it was undiagnosed for a really long time. And we'll probably do an episode on that related to advocacy and just navigating the medical system, especially for women who are perimenopausal or of menopausal age, even if that's not what you're dealing with. The amount of just dismissal and gaslighting that occurs is really, really scary. And after I went through what I did, I've received so many more messages of others who have experienced the same thing. So we're going to go over that. But the first symptoms that were really apparent to me was I felt a lot of anxiety. And I'm not someone who has experienced anxiety like that. And I couldn't really pinpoint what was going on or why. I was also crying a lot, and I'm not a crier. So I didn't know what that was about. I started getting really wound up. Now, I've always been a little bit wound up. That's kind of my personality. But I was really wound up, really, really wound up. You can ask anyone who was around me. I was really wound up. I did have a lot of pressure going on in my life. I mean, granted, we were dealing with COVID. And if you were leading groups of people at this time, you know that was very, very difficult because there was just so much going on and you couldn't please anyone. And so there was a lot of pressure on that front on making decisions for the group, even when people didn't agree and you couldn't necessarily explain why you were making decisions. There were a lot of reasons, I think, why I would necessarily be anxious and depressed. But it felt like it was more than that because I've gone through a lot of really hard things in my life. And that was not the way I responded. And so then I started gaining all of this weight fast for no reason. Like I was not doing starter bread. I wasn't doing the sourdough and the banana bread. We were working our asses off during that time. We were not resting one iota. So I was not eating more I was not exercising before, so it's not like that changed. I did not stop exercising. I never started exercising. There was no exercise happening. And then I started to feel this knot. And by the way, this is Karma. Hi, Karma. Do you want to introduce yourself to all of our Hustle and Flow people? Karma is a new addition. We'll talk more about her later with some later updates. But I just knew that something wasn't right. And so I just kept going to doctors and telling them, something's not right with me. And it took a long time for them to finally see that I had an adrenal tumor. But even after that, it took them longer to make sure that that's what was causing my problems. It's a rare tumor and it was not cancerous, which I think is kind of confusing for a lot of people because they're like, well, if it wasn't cancerous, why would it cause so many problems? But it was what was called a functional tumor, which means that it was releasing nonstop cortisol. And it was the nonstop cortisol that was causing me to gain the weight, to constantly be on edge, to be anxious, to be depressed, to be wound up. And over time, my skin started thinning, my muscles, my bones, my veins. It created so many issues. And then when they had to remove the entire adrenal, they had to, long story short, put me on steroids to keep me alive because I didn't have an immune system at that time. And steroids do the exact same thing. So I had all this joint pain. It was pretty miserable. I was not myself. My brain was not working. It was 100% hijacked by a tumor that we couldn't shut off that valve. So none of my tools were working. Mindfulness wasn't working. Meditation wasn't working. Thought work wasn't working. Therapy wasn't working. Nothing was working. And I started to have brain fog and just I couldn't think as strategically. And it was a pretty terrible experience. And I definitely feel like in that process, I lost a bit of my soul and my spirit. And if you were around me at all during that time, you know that I was a much different person. I was either, and it was because, which is so interesting, right? That I teach about fight and flight and flow and all of the things and courage and fear. And I had no choice around it. My body was just stuck, right? It was like the emergency brake was on and we couldn't get it unstuck, or I guess it would be the opposite. That analogy doesn't make very much sense, does it? I guess it was more like the accelerator. The accelerator was stuck because it was my body was going a million miles a minute. And it was I thought a bear was chasing me at all times. And the way that someone responds when a bear is chasing them, even when they're sitting on a couch, right, is not okay. It was a wild experience. I am happy to say that the tumor is gone and the vast majority of my health issues have resolved. I am still working through trying to kind of get back emotionally and mentally. I'm 100% back to my old self, which was the piece, frankly, that I lost and had missed the most. But physically, I'm rebounding as well. I'm also in my 40s, so I may not get back exactly to where I was, but I also have hope. I've been more active and adventurous in the last 6 months, I think, than I probably have in 6 years. So that's a good sign. But that brings me to hustle and flow, right? I want to come back. I want to be in people's lives, but I also don't want to go back to the business that I 100% had. And the reason why is because I have learned flow on a whole new level. When everything is stripped away and you're just why is everything being stripped away? And when you don't have a career, I've never not had a career. When you've not had a purpose, I've never not had a purpose. When you're not going a million miles a minute, there's nothing to be productive with. What's left? Oh, goodness. All right. We'll have a whole episode on that, I'm for sure. Probably more. For me, I was just what matters? I don't matter. My life doesn't matter. Nothing matters. And I had to learn what my identity looked like without a career and a purpose, or the purpose I thought I had. And so I just had to find joy again. I had to find peace again. And so I just became regimented that I was going to find it. And that led me to exploring and doing a lot of childhood things. I started dancing again, started singing and writing. I started painting, which was not a childhood thing, but I've been having so much fun with. Turns out I love it. I've been decorating and just really getting back into texture and pattern and color and being super creative. It has just been, I've been doing stand-up comedy. Yeah, stand-up comedy. Like, I'm having a blast. I'm taking acting classes. And so for me, the flow that I have found, I want to share that with you, and I don't want to walk away from it. And the joy that I have found in these things, I don't want to walk away and go back straight to building and putting back together the business I had, because I love this so much. I cherish this so much, and I don't know where it might go. So I'm holding on to it. But I also love you guys, and I want to bring back hustle and flow. I want to share. I love talking business and marketing and strategy and meditation and mindfulness and just all things hustle and flow. I love it. I want to talk about it. So that's why I was like, well, we're going to bring it back. I'm also doing my retreats again. That's the only thing I'm doing in the business. They are high level, which means they are expensive, because it's the only thing I'm doing. And for example, like the podcast and other things aren't feeders. We'll do an episode on loss leaders and marketing tactics where you break even, which was a lot of the things I used to do for the higher end stuff. I won't have that anymore. So the retreats aren't going to be for everyone. I'll talk about them on the podcast, but that's just going to be for a few people every year. So for me on the podcast, like, I wanted to truly just serve. And I feel like I really tried to serve in the past, but it definitely was a feeder. It was a marketing tool. And now, like, it's not that. Like, I just want to give. Like, I just want to show up. I just want to be in community. And the way that we're going to do that, so some things will be the same, some things will be different, and you can help make it wonderful for all of us. Okay, so here's what's going to be the same. It's still going to be about 30 minutes, give or take. It is still going to be weekly. It'll come out on Tuesdays, just like it did before. It will still be on all podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, iHeartMusic, wherever you get your podcasts. It will still be available for audio feed every single week. We're still going to talk about all things hustle, all things flow, definitely social justice like we did before. None of that's going to change. Here's what will change. We've got the video format. That will be on YouTube. So that is a new opportunity, a new way for you to tune in and watch it. I have learned I love watching YouTube podcasts with video on my TV. If you've got a smart TV, and I think all TVs are smart these days, you just go to the YouTube app, which is free, and you just search for your podcast and you watch it on the big screen. It's awesome. So that may be one way that you enjoy watching it. You can watch it in the morning with your breakfast. You can grab a glass of wine, whatever you want. You can also listen in the car. The other is, I used to be really cautious about the language I was using and making sure that, like, if you all had your kiddos in the car, that it was all cool. Just know that's not happening anymore. I mean, if an episode is clean, it's by accident, because I cuss a lot and I can be highly inappropriate and raunchy. And like, that's the real me. That is the real me. And so we're just going to say this is an adult show, and it's up to you about what you do with your kids. You know, all of my nieces and nephews, I've always cussed around them. I've been that aunt. Most of my kids, my friends' kids too, like, that's Heather. So, you know, like, if you don't care, cool. If it bothers you, wear headset. Don't have them around. I don't know. But just assume they're all going to be explicit in content and language, because I'm trying to really bring more of myself to the table, bring the full me, all the different sides. I've got a huge whiteboard in front of me, which you cannot see, but that's what I'm looking at. If you're watching me, you're like, what is she staring at? I want to make sure I don't forget anything. There's going to be more pop culture because I've got a lot more flow in my life, and because I'm doing the stand-up comedy and the entertainment, there might be a little more pop culture going on. And let's see. And the home base. Yeah, the home base is going to be YouTube. Here's the other amazing thing about YouTube. I don't know if this would work on the TV or not. Probably if you're young and know how to work it. I don't. But there's the chat functionality. You can comment. It's like a blog, right? I miss that part. When I was doing the podcast, I would run into so many of you, like at a conference or something, and you'd be like, I feel like I know you so well because you're in my ears all the time, but I didn't know you. And it's a little awkward, but I can finally get to know you if you want me to get to know you, because we can interact below every podcast video on YouTube. So you can leave comments and I can respond and we can chat together and other people can join in and it can be more of a community. And I really miss that. And I'd really love to have that. So that's what's going to be new. As I said, I'm only going to be doing retreats. By the way, my next retreat is February. There's only going to be one in 2024 and it's coming up. It's in February. It's at Miraval. It's at Arizona. It's going to be amazing. It's the transformational retreat that I lead there. If you want to find out more about that, you can go to heatherjoyhubbard.com. But here's the deal. Here's what I wanted to share. Because this is not a feeder, right? Like it's not a marketing tool. I really want it to stand on its own. And YouTube is a way to allow it to potentially be monetized and allow it to stand on its own. And that's where I need your help. So if you love the podcast, if you can't wait to listen to it every week, please get the word out to everyone that I am back, because I don't have the email list anymore. I'm only on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook or LinkedIn or anything else. So you got to help me get the word out and bring new people in. This is not just for lawyers. We are going to cover so much. And in fact, there will probably never be an episode again that's just for lawyers. Just saying, probably. I mean, y'all might convince me otherwise. But I need your help with subscribers so that we can actually get this going again and get it monetized in a way that y'all don't have to ever potentially pay me money, right? Like you don't ever have to sign up for anything. So it's a little competition. I've got to read through it or I'm totally going to forget it. But here's the deal. This is on YouTube. And even if you want to listen to it like on Apple or something else, like that's totally cool, but you still need to do this on YouTube for it to count. Okay. If we get 1,000 subscribers on the YouTube podcast channel, then I will post a stand-up comedy showcase that I did, the entire showcase on YouTube as a bonus episode for you. It's like 6 or 7 minutes. I did it last month at Blue Coast Comedy in Nashville, and I'll post the whole thing for you if you do that. All right, if we get 2,500 subscribers, I will post I think it's like 35-minute Simple Courage keynote. Now, people used to pay a lot of money for that keynote, and I will share it with y'all on YouTube. It was a great keynote. It was a fabulous keynote. All about where I share a lot about my journey. I think I was probably more vulnerable in that than I've ever been, even on the podcast. I used to share a lot on the podcast. So I share a lot more in that. I will post that to YouTube if we get 2,500 subscribers. But now here's where it gets really good, right? Really, really, really good. If we have 5,000 subscribers, I will host a live show, probably stand up, but we can add in anything you want. A live show here in Nashville. You're going to have to get to Nashville. You're going to have to fly to Nashville, but Nashville is so much fun. But I will do a show for free if we get 5,000. And I always believe in throwing out like a big, crazy goal. In my mind, this is a crazy goal, but we're going to put it out there in case y'all are real serious about this. If we get 10,000 subscribers, we will not only do a show in Nashville, but I'll throw a party, a huge party for us to all get together. I know a lot of you actually know each other. You can get your girlfriends together, and guys, if you're listening to, you can come as well, but I will actually put events around it and like throw a whole event and like just for the podcast, just for the reunion, no strings attached. So, but that's 10,000, which means like you got to get your kid and your dad and your cousins and all of your colleagues. Like you got to get everybody to be subscribing to this podcast. Okay. So I'm so excited to be back. Leave a comment below the video and let me know if you have topics that you want me to discuss. I've already got some lined up, but I am here to talk about anything and everything. I just want to be back in your lives and us having fun again and talking about important things. So, bitches, I am back. Welcome back. Hustle and Flow is here to stay.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, give the episode a like and leave a comment below so we can keep the conversation going. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future episode or announcement. Listening on Apple, Spotify, or another podcast app, you can watch the video and join in the after show conversation by visiting hustleandflowpodcast.com.